Conversation with a Geographer. I'm Mike DeVivo, professor of geography at Grand Rapids Community College, and today we're very fortunate to have Maureen Smith, professor of geography at Saddleback College in California. Maureen, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Maureen, as I often start these discussions, I like to ask those that are being interviewed, really, what got them interested in geography in the first place? Maybe it was something in your childhood, or maybe you could talk about some of your studies. Would you care to offer a few comments?
Sure. So I've been told, and it seems that I came to geography, the discipline, at a much younger age than kind of the norm of our students, in college, taking intro to physical or cultural to fulfill a GE, and they realize, what an incredible discipline and area of study it is. My whole childhood, luckily, I got to travel with my parents. They were divorced, and so they each took me on trips, all summer long.
Mm-hmm.
I was basically traveling, taking turns with one and then the other. And so that was just normal. I didn't, think about that I was lucky. I was getting to go all over the country and even sometimes out of the country. And my mom remembers so vividly, it was my sixth grade teacher. Each class, the teacher got to pick one subject that they were interested in and wanted to teach the students. And the other sixth grade teacher was Greek, and he chose Greek mythology for his class. And my teacher picked geography, and she had this huge map of the world on one of our classroom walls. And she went to my mom and said that I would spend tons of time just kind of looking at the map and saying to people, okay, I want to go here and I want to go here. And I just, wanted to go all over the place. And so it was just kind of a passing comment that she made to my mom. And my mom happened to be a counselor at Santa Barbara City College. She, of course, knew you could take geography classes, major in geography. And so as young as a sixth grader, I already had this concept that, okay, when I go to college, I'm going to study, geography. And then my senior year of high school, I wanted to take a class at the community college, and just to kind of get an idea. And I picked a night class, and it was cultural geography. And it was taught by a part-time instructor at the time, Steve Palladino, he's been full-time at Ventura College for many, many years. And I'll never forget, it was, probably only the second or third class of the semester. And I don't even remember what the subject was that he lectured on for, the 3-hour night class. And I just came home to my mom and I said, yep, this is definitely the route I'm going. And so I actually, was kind of ahead of the game entering Santa Barbara City College by already knowing, this is my major, this is where I want to transfer, and this is what, I want to do. And then, of course, having the counselor for a mom, she had my whole, 2 years planned out of exactly the courses I needed to take. And at the time at Santa Barbara City College, the geographer was, oh my gosh, and it just slipped my mind. I'll think of it. Great instructor, super popular. And I was able to take then his classes, which got me even more excited about, majoring in geography.
Were there any other students that thought about majoring in geography when you were there at the community college?
That's a great question. I don't remember until transferring to the 4-year, anybody in my classes. And actually, at that time, I couldn't get an AA in geography. That wasn't even an option. So I got an AA in liberal arts.
Sure.
Knowing I was going to transfer into a geography program elsewhere. And so, I think about being, because so many students go to Santa Barbara City College and transfer to UCSB, they didn't actually offer at the 2-year level world regional. So I could only take cultural, physical with the lab, and then they actually offered economic geography because for some reason with UCSB they had an agreement. So I was able to take that, and that was kind of the maximum geography I could take. And I don't remember anyone else in like the physical or the lab or the economic that mentioned, that was the route they were going. They were just taking it as a GE.
But you developed that firm foundation in geography at the community college level, which is really very common for many students in California who go on to major in geography at the CSU schools. But you went to Chapel Hill.
I did, and I just remembered the geographer at City College was Carl Sundbeck, who's now retired. Great guy. Yes, and so then I left California and went to Chapel Hill.
And you worked with some geographers there as an undergraduate. Were there any faculty that you found particularly striking?
They had a pretty strong department. I'm sure they still do. Man, and I should have prepared and looked up some of these names because I feel terrible that they would slip my mind. One thing that was really amazing when I got to Carolina was there was a fairly new faculty member who had been born and raised in Santa Barbara. And I can't remember if I somehow found that out or if maybe my mom looked it up. And he was I can't remember his focus, but he taught all the remote sensing classes. And he, I don't think he went to school in Santa Barbara. He actually grew up like me and went elsewhere for university, maybe UCSB, but I can't remember. And then just kind of, ended up getting hired at Chapel Hill. And that was really great because, of course, him and I could just chat and reminisce about, being from Santa Barbara. And then I remember he was teaching a remote sensing class that was really for master's students. It wasn't kind of even for, juniors or seniors and undergrad, but he convinced me to take it just so I could have a class with him because he kind of didn't have any other classes that fit for my major or what I was doing. And oh man, I remember it just being so over my head and so advanced. And he was so great. He just kept saying, just sit and listen. Just listen to the lectures. It's okay that you are confused and don't understand anything. Just take this class. It's advanced, but it will be with your GIS. It will, just help you down the road in your whatever job path you go. So that was kind of a neat experience because I was the only undergraduate student in the class. It was very intimidating, but I think, really valuable.
Certainly. And it was at North Carolina then where you really began to develop some skills in GIS?
Yeah, because at Santa Barbara City College at the time, there was no GIS available. So definitely. And I think we were required to take, kind of an intro and intermediate. I think I had 2 GIS classes and kind of the same. It was, early on, it was just so, the whole class, I mean, it was so over our head in that early stages of, the software and trying to figure out what on earth we were doing. And in that class, it was almost all just geography majors. Because I mean, it wasn't like GIS was new, but it really wasn't prevalent at the time. And so it was like learning any new skill. I mean, we just, every step, where do we click? What do we do? How do we do this? The poor lab tech was, annoyed with us because we need them for everything.
The user friendliness today is much, much, much better than it was when it was in its infancy or adolescence. I think there have been perhaps better technical writers for many GIS packages today than there were in the past, for sure, because there are intermediate steps that were skipped so often in instructions, as recently as probably 13 years ago,
Yeah.
So you left North Carolina and returned to California. You didn't like the South, huh?
I'm glad I experienced it. I think it enhanced my cultural geography teaching skills, and the class I teach a ton. But I didn't plan on staying. I actually took a route towards you and spent 2 years in Chicago as a city planner before going back to California.
And you were involved in planning then in Chicago?
Yeah. So at North Carolina, they have and it could have changed now, but they have a city and regional planning department that is only masters. There's no kind of undergraduate degree, there wasn't, but they worked with the geography department. And one of our requirements was intro to city and regional planning, which was great. And all geographers in undergrad, I think, would be a huge benefit. And I took that class and just loved it, and actually went to their department and asked if I could take another class, and nothing, they didn't have anything other than that intro for undergrads. But somehow I managed to be allowed to take a specific graduate course on public transportation.
Oh.
Which I also loved. And so just having those two courses on my, transcripts along with 2 GIS classes.
Sure.
I got to Chicago and found it was for the I forget the name, but it's every city that's a certain size has to have, and each state funds it. So it wasn't the city that ran our program, it was the state. And it was like a regional planning, it was called the Chicago Area Transportation Study. And we kind of had to be the center hub for all the city, the neighborhoods have their groups, and, and it was an incredible, enormous kind of.
For a city of its size, Chicago has great public transportation options. It really does, and it's a model that can be emulated elsewhere. There are few cities in the U.S. that have such a solid network, really, of public transportation.
I just was there in November, and I hadn't been in like 10 years. I hadn't been back, and it was seamless. I didn't have to do any research. It was like, get your 5-day pass, and we took the buses and the L everywhere. I mean, we just didn't even have to do anything. It was incredible how well, and you can get the app now, and it just tells you, like, okay, the next bus is in 3 minutes. You don't have to wait in the rain, step inside somewhere and the bus will be here boom, on the dot kind of a thing. It's incredible. It was kind of same as going to Carolina. It was a great experience. I love my mom's side of the family's from Chicago. I love the city. But as a Californian, I only survived 2 winters and had to come home.
You didn't really find the winters very appealing. Is that what you're saying?
I just couldn't quite, it just never ended. That was my problem.
Well, I think there are a couple of weeks in July,
Yes. Yep, they have summer and winter, and that's it.
That is it. It's true.
Yeah.
So you went back to California, and then what?
What I did was I applied to grad school. That was kind of okay, I'm going to, quit my job, but it's because I'm going back to grad school. And it really, the idea was to teach at the community college. Growing up with a mom who worked in the system, I knew what just a fantastic system California has. And I just and it hadn't actually dawned on me until working in Chicago and working, in a cubicle, just doing GIS all day long. It sort of was like, I don't know how long I can do this for. So I need to get my master's to allow me to consider teaching. And so I got into Cal State Long Beach. And that sort of course, dictated where I was going and what I was doing. And they, at the time, and I think they still do, but on their website, they sort of said they had a focus within the master's program aimed towards teaching. That of course you're going to do research, but I think it was smart. They recognized, and especially within their region, there's so many community colleges.
Sure.
That would be a smart path to kind of promote for part of their program. And so that's what kind of led me to them. And I didn't do a lot of research or anything. It just, they were accepting. And I actually I was very worried because I had grown to love not owning a car and being able to move around Chicago seamlessly. And I didn't know a lot about Long Beach when I applied. And I talked to a few people, and it sounded like, it had a very similar city feel. And I didn't know that until I moved there. And
where the campus is, especially, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. But even, from campus all the way to downtown, I had a car, but it didn't move. I used my bike, the buses, and then you can walk a lot of places depending on where you live. And so the transition ended up being much better than, I was thinking LA and freeway traffic. And I barely saw the freeway for 2 years. I just lived in Long Beach and went to school and worked on campus and got my degree.
And so you got your master's degree in geography at Long Beach. And from there, did you become a freeway flyer?
I did. So I did a little, I worked in the GIS lab and actually got a kind of internship, but it was a paid internship at a private firm doing GIS. And then I think it was after just my first full year, I went full time. So I was able to almost do all my classes in a year. And so that allowed me to, if I was going to be, if a school wanted to hire me part-time, I qualified with the equivalency because I was basically everything but the final, thing. And so I did it. And this is an example of how they kind of promoted the teaching. Master students could take, I think it was like a 1-unit internship, and work with a community college or university geographer. And so I got a recommendation to reach out to Irene Nessa at OCC. And it basically, and it was lucky, it was over the summertime, and I sat in on her, 2-day a week, 3-hour, probably physical lecture class, and did that. And so then with sort of all the coursework done, and then being able to say, I, sat in the classroom and observed for a whole semester. I helped with grading. I, did a couple guest lectures. Cerritos College had some part-timer get a full-time job right before the fall. '06 semester started. And Irene recommended when they reached out to her saying, oh my gosh, we desperately need someone. I was able to slip right in. And so my whole second year in grad school, I was, very minimal. I didn't want to commit and be overwhelmed, which I would have been. So I was able to just teach, like a couple classes at Cerritos, and then in the fall, and then spring, same, and then rapidly other schools started reaching out. And so I did freeway flying.
There's certainly demand for good instructors.
Yeah. And so it worked. I mean, it was just incredible. And I tell that to friends of mine who've now gone through the master's program at either Fullerton or Long Beach. I've had a couple friends just completely change careers and get into freeway flying. And the same kind of thing happens where it's one class here, and then quickly those of us looking for good instructors discover, they're great in the classroom, and man, they all of a sudden they're having to say no to classes because their schedule is full.
And so when did you get your first full-time appointment?
So I did freeway flying for, I think, about 2 years, and then fall '07. So that shows you actually, I think it was '04 that I started freeway flying, and '07 I started full-time at San Bernardino Valley College. And I did that for a year. I never actually expected to leave after a year. That was not at all even on the radar. I left Long Beach. That was tough. I almost wish I was still in Long Beach. But I left Long Beach and moved out to Redlands, and spent a year out there, and actually really enjoyed that year and loved the students. It was a really great environment. But it was much farther from the ocean, and farther from friends and family.
And much hotter summers.
Yes. Yeah. So that, and I still look back and I remember, my gosh, in the winter, the snow on the mountains, and
it's beautiful.
So close to things that when you're in the coastal LA and Orange County, that it's a farther distance than, so you can't kind of spoil depending on what you like, what you're close to. But I had part-timed at Saddleback for at least a year, maybe almost 2 years in there. And so out of the blue, they got to add a third position. And I just thought, well, I gotta do this in case I can, get back to the coast, and landed it, and have been there now. I'm completing my 15th year.
Wow. 15 years at Saddleback. And it's a lovely campus. It's in a great location. You hit a gold mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, in terms of your career, in many ways, it's one of the best places, one would think, to engage in community college teaching in California, you know. And so there, what do you teach at Saddleback?
The different classes I teach.
Yeah.
So I teach physical, intro to physical, both face to face and online. When I can, I teach the lab. I just on my last sabbatical, I wrote a custom lab manual. But because the demand for the lab online is so huge, we're struggling with even offering it face to face. Dan Walsh and I are pushing as hard as we can to maintain some kind of presence on campus in our lab room, but it's tough. I teach cultural. I've done that all throughout. I haven't taught World Regional in quite a while. When I got to Saddleback, both Christy Brenner and Dan Walsh loved teaching World, and they didn't like teaching cultural, and I love cultural. So I was like, no problem. You guys take care of that. I've got cultural. A few years ago, I added California geography. I hadn't taught that ever. And with the transition to so much demand online, I decided to kind of take that on. And
California geography is a required course for those in education, right?
That I have found that I still only get a few, but I'll get, and actually in both cultural, I'll get some older adult educators in K through 12. And sometimes it's more like in cultural, it's part of their continuing education. So they're already in the classroom and they're certified, but I think they get certain times or every few years they need to, you know, and advance or continue learning in different disciplines, and cultural geography pops up and they take it. But that's an avenue I need to look in, because sometimes I'll get child development majors and they're taking either California or cultural. So somewhere in there's some realms where people need to take it. And so now that we've switched to California online, there's enough of demand. I'm teaching it every semester as opposed to year. So that's great.
And don't you teach a field studies course?
So I actually created curriculum. We had, I think, 6 different field courses on the books, and I wrote I think I wrote curriculum for 5. And for 10 years, and kind of every fall, every spring, and then most summers, I would offer a field studies. And I was getting kind of towards the end where I was kind of feeling burnout. It's very difficult. Over the years, getting the district and the college, the paperwork was constantly changing, the rules was constantly changing. It made it extremely difficult to offer a field studies. And so I kind of hit the wall and was like, I think, and I was going back to Big Sur for a 2-unit summer course, field course, summer 20. And of course it got canceled with COVID. And we haven't brought them back. And I'm kind of taking a step back from that. And so unfortunately, it's been so long, we've had to, based on curriculum rules, delete almost all of them from the books.
I see. Well, that's unfortunate, but and it just demonstrates how there are administrative officials that have no understanding of geography that insert different requirements because of some fear associated with liability that seems to have no sense at all. That spark one to really make some of these cancellations, because it's really important. And we know the value of field studies when we go on our field trips with the California Geographical Society. You know, you've been a very important board member, for the society, and you've been with CGS for a long time. Would you like to comment on what value you see CGS brings to geographers in California?
So I actually didn't discover CGS until it took meeting Irene and starting to part-time, and then meeting Dan Walsh at Saddleback. And at the time, they were both board members. And I'll never forget, it was the last time we went to CGS had Anza Borrego as the annual conference. And that must have been early spring, because we had to go earlier in the year because it gets too hot when we would normally have the conference. And that was the first time I was applying to full-time positions. And I hadn't heard about it. And I remember thinking, I had heard of APCG because my advisors at Long Beach said, you got to present here, which I did, my master's thesis. And, I'm thinking, why wouldn't they have mentioned CGS? This is a much better, very local. I didn't have to fly to Phoenix for a conference. I could just be right here in California. And it would have been a wonderful way as a first presenting practice and experience, as opposed to jumping right into APCG. But, so I was very bummed about that. I thought, how did, Long Beach not mention this? And thanks to them, and I remember I, hadn't heard of it. The conference was in like 2 weeks or something. And they just said, you have just even show up for the Saturday and be there, talk to people, experience it. And it was the best advice ever, because I actually, without these people knowing it, and without me knowing it at the time, I actually met some geographers who were then going to be on the hiring committees of my interviews. And it wasn't till I got in the interview that I saw this person and was like, oh my gosh, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I chatted with them at the banquet, sitting at the table, and had no idea, that who they were, anything like that. And I just jokingly say, like, that got me my first job because it showed that I was active in the geographic community outside of just teaching classes. It showed that I could hold conversations with geographers.
Congeniality goes a long way.
Yeah. And so I give that advice, and I have wonderful part-timers, and, I've never seen them at a CGS. And every time, I chat with them, especially getting ready to go to CGS. I send out an email like, hey, everyone, it's right here in Los Angeles this year. You've got to go, go and bring your students. And, and that's then the other thing was early on, once then I got hired, when you identify your majors early on at a community college level, being able to bring them, even again, just to that Saturday, so that they can experience professional talks. And it's even better when they know where they're going to transfer to. And, Fullerton faculty are there, and Long Beach faculty are there. And here's Humboldt. I've had students transfer all the way to Humboldt.
Sure.
And that, is just an invaluable experience for the students.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, with just about a minute to go here, Maureen, I'm going to ask you to, reflect on your career so far and offer a few words of advice, maybe for aspiring undergraduates in geography, or maybe even colleagues, what wise counsel might you have to offer?
For I think for aspiring, community college instructors, I think attending the conferences is kind of the number one. One, it's just so fun to be around so many geographers. And we talk about students get that same as, we've all experienced. You can major in geography. What's geography? How can you study geography? Our whole careers, it's a battle.
And CGS has those passionate geographers that are having fun, that make the conference, the annual conference, really a joyful occasion.
Yeah, and students come back and they're just buzzing because it's, oh my gosh, this is actually a huge discipline. Maybe everyone I know can't believe I like geography, but there are all these people that do. And it's so exciting when you realize, all these people love the same things that you love, to study and to read about and to do. So I love that. And so for faculty too, just the conferences are so much fun. What other advice? Well, we don't probably have any more time.
Well, you have time for one more if you can offer it.
I think something that I discovered in grad school, and it always depends on what you're planning on doing. But because I knew that I was going to teach at the community college level, I had to force myself, instead of just taking courses focused in the things I really loved, like urban geography and biogeography, I forced myself to stay as broad, or to take courses that still qualified, but not necessarily, wasn't really something that I enjoyed, because I knew I had to stay as broad as possible based on, at the CCs, teaching intro courses.
Absolutely. At the community colleges, one has to be ready to teach everything. Unlike institutions that concentrate on graduate programs. So yes, being prepared to teach everything is very important. And I think that's a very astute comment. Go ahead.
We have to, it's sort of like, and I've heard people say, it's like, I know a little bit about a lot of things. People always say, well, what was your focus? What was your focus? And it's like, I can't have a focus because I have to make sure I'm actually learning a little bit about every subject. And I'm sure, I wish I would love to have gone on and get a PhD in something super focused in something I love. But I couldn't do that. I had to stay broad. And so to be, kind of the best overall geography instructor, because I can't teach soils geography and I can't teach, city and regional planning of one city or whatever,
It is. Well, you do have a reputation for being an exemplary geography instructor and being an exemplary geographer. And for that, we thank you. And thank you for being here today, Maureen. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to have you. Thank you.
It's neat to see you in between the once-a-year conference.
It's good to see you as well. I'm going to sign off for now and look forward to seeing you next year up in Reading, I guess.
Reading, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Geography lives.
That's right.
And this concludes this episode of Conversation with a Geographer. Thank you.